Karen, I'm so glad to have you on board the Transatlantic. I mean, look, thanks for your time and like for like giving like gift me with your presence. And like today is gonna be a really special day to me. Like your career is astonishing, and like you know your journey is like it's fascinating. So thank you so much for being on board the Transatlantic.
Simona, thank you so very much. You're so flattering, and I'm thrilled to be part of this. And yeah, let's go. I'm excited.
I would say, yeah, let's go. Let's go through the first question of the 7 Cs, and it's gonna be a hell of a ride. First one. In 2006, the New York Times sent shockwaves through the literary world when it revealed that It Boy and emerging author J.T. Leroy, which actually the full name was Jeremiah Terminator Leroy, wasn't what everybody thought he was. Leroy was just the creative expression of 40-year-old housewife Laura Alberts. J.T. Leroy did exist in flesh, but just as a young boy from the hills of Virginia who was a lot lizard. Now, the boy was dressed up as a girl and had a mom named Sarah who also was a lot lizard. He used to appear in public decked out with wigs and sunglasses. Now, the two books that were written by Laura Alberts under the fake persona of Leroy that burst onto the scene of American literature, they were beautifully written. Now, it was a truly transatlantic experience because literature crossed onto mainstream, and Leroy, this kid with like a blonde wig, became the friend of many Hollywood actors. Asia Argento was one of them. Now, one of the books that burst onto the scene was titled The Heart is Deceitful Above All Things. Now, the question is, has your heart having been deceitful when it comes to making career moves in advertising? And in other words, have you ever found yourself in a role like J.T. Leroy that wasn't your role and you didn't fully recognize yourself in it?
Yes, I think it's a great question, and I would say absolutely, especially in the beginning of my career. So I was a foreigner. My dream was to go out of school. I'd already heard about him when I was studying design in Switzerland, Goodby Silverstein and Partners. This fantastic award-winning agent, really smart agency in the United States, in San Francisco. My dream was to go there and work there and learn from them and do the kind of work they did there. And I went from studying design in Switzerland, and growing up in Norway, but being half Mexican, I was already somebody from across oceans who didn't fit anywhere because I was not part of what they were.
Right.
And then I went and studied film and finished my degree in Los Angeles. And I was lucky enough to go to Goodby right out of school. And what I found was I was at a place where I wanted so desperately to be. And I wanted so desperately to do the kind of work they did and get the briefs that the guys around me got. But I didn't fit in because I was the only woman in the creative department. I wasn't American. I wasn't even one thing. I was Norwegian Mexican. And I didn't get this. And at the time, what was really popular was like, we were doing Got Milk, we were doing Sega. And there was this American kind of bro boy humor culture and humor, this American boy humor that I couldn't do. Like, it wasn't me, it wasn't authentic to me. But I was so young and still had a lot of insecurities. And I admired the agency so much that I was trying to be like them. I was trying to write creative and come up with ideas like that. And I was trying to fit in the boy culture, but I realized I just couldn't. Like it wasn't natural to me. And I wasn't able, I think, to do the kind of work that has become my strength once I found my self-confidence. Because I wasn't recognizing myself. I was trying to be somebody else to fit in. And there was no way I was going to fit in. I wasn't them.
What a beautiful story. I gotta say, I mean, look, I know your work, and this is the very first time I met you in person. But I'm always a big fan of like cultural crossover. I mean, when I read that you were like, you know, half Norwegian, half Mexican, what a fascinating thing to be, honestly. Like, you know, and what a powerful statement. Like, you know, people can't label you. I mean, I love when people get so dazzled and confused because you too many things in one. And mostly in America happen, right? Like where there is a very like, you know, there is the tendency to put like, to label things and to put people in silos. And it's, you can
Yeah.
tell that people sometimes are intimidated by like this like crossover culture. But in the case of GT Leroy, that was a hoax. But of course, your career.
No, in my case, it was very, very earnest. I mean, ended up staying at the agency for over 17 years, so I found my way.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But yeah, I found my way, but it took a while, and it was like it was like wearing clothes that didn't really fit me and were itchy, but I really wanted them to look good.
Good. Second question. Now, the last era of privacy before cell phones and social media was an era where creative collaborations were mainly fed by physical presence. You had to be there. You had to experience in person. It was also an era where recreating the truth to fit like the narrative was still possible in a time where typewriters, landlines, 35mm film, and paper files were standard. Now, there is a film that was born out of that era, and it's called My Own Private Idaho, starring Keanu Reeves and River Phoenix. During the making of the film, River Phoenix developed a very close friendship with Flair from the Red Chili Pepper. Flair play a very small role in the film. River and Flair would spend countless hours doing filming, playing music together, inventing together, creating together. Imagine two oceans mixing waters at the right time, at the right moment in time. Now, have you ever experienced such a close alchemy with someone before the cell phone, before Zoom, before like social media? And if so, if you did experience this alchemy, what this kind of partnership had an impact in your career?
Yes. And the funny thing is, I mean, soon there's not a lot of people who remember anything before social media and all those things, right?
I do remember.
Yeah, for me, it was like, I remember I was the first person at Goodby who knew how to work a computer. And so their art directors would come and ask me to set their headlines. But
Beautiful.
no, but that lasted a year. And then the new world you're talking about started. I have been very, very fortunate in my life, in my personal life, in my love life, and my career life, that the person that I think has inspired me the most and I've collaborated the most with became my husband. And he was my professor in art school. It was very scandalous. And I really like admired him, like this amazing, inspiring talent. He was a creative director on Apple at the time. And I fell in love with him both as a mind and also it was a time as a student where I was really discovering myself. So it was such an exciting and energizing time, and a mentor. And so first he was my professor. We also fell in love. We lived together. We got married. Then he was my mentor at the same time as he was my lover and my partner. And then over time, he became my partner, not just as in a romantic relationship, but also in my career. And in many ways, if you remember from The Godfather, Robert Duvall's role, the consigliere, my husband has been my consigliere. And as I have raised in the business, he retired from the business 14 years ago and is a fine artist. But I could always come home and talk about like a very nuanced thing that happened in a client meeting that was making me crazy and I wasn't sure how to handle. And here's someone who knew exactly what I was talking about. And we would sit in the bathtub together, and like, I would work out how I was going to manage that, sell that work to the client the next day, or manage that conflict. And over time, as I've had more and more senior leadership roles, he has been a fantastic sounding board. And I would say my secret weapon, he's my consigliere.
That's awesome. You know, when I was writing down the question, I got inspired by the relationship between Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn.
Yeah.
There is actually a letter that Katharine Hepburn wrote to Spencer Tracy the day he passed away, and it's beautiful. It's on the internet. You can actually read it. It's a beautiful letter, and he has that kind of alchemy and partnership and like, you know, mind waves that you establish with another person so strong. And make me actually, the story that you just said to me, it reminded me of that letter, which is funny because it comes full circles, because I was writing the question based on, like, you know, the letter. Now you mentioned this Thai alchemy with like your partner, and now it was like, it bring me back to the letter. Anyway, great. Like, this is so lucky to have such a kind like relationship. Third question. Yeah. The lowest point of Earth is 6 miles down the ocean off the coast of Philippines, and the highest point on Earth is like in Nepal, is the tip of the K1. And now if you connect the distance between the lowest and the highest point on Earth, you get 11 miles. So check this out. It's only 11 miles between the highest point and the lowest point. It's pretty much like Manhattan. Now, it's roughly the length of Manhattan, but the width is much larger. Now, if a cosmic giant was to come on Earth and rub his finger around this marble ball, it will find it smoother than a cute ball. Now, this proves that perception is everything. Our world is made entirely of the way we perceive reality. My reality is different from your reality, and my eyes see different from your eyes because we perceive things differently. Now, as your perception of the advertising industry change throughout the years, and as the distance between the lowest point in creativity and the highest point in creativity reduce, or the two extremes go further apart?
It's a really juicy question, and I feel like we could talk for hours about this. But I think maybe I'd like to, the way I would think about it is, you know, we have access to so much more now, and we see so much more now. So it can be easy to say, oh, there's so much more crappy, mediocre work. And back in the day of Burnback and Ogilvy, the great work was great. But I remember when we were living here in the States, and I was working at Goodby, and my husband had his own agency, and we were always looking at the work from London, like, oh, the work in D&AD and the work they did in London was so amazing. And then I got the opportunity in 2012 to go to Europe and work there, and I was so excited to go there, and I thought all the advertising was going to be amazing. And then the truth is, the only work that I saw from London was the great work, because you sit in your living room and you watch TV in England, and there's a lot of really shitty advertising, and a lot of it has puppets for some reason. They're crazy about puppets there. But what I would say is, I actually think, and it's so funny because so many other people in the business would say, oh, there's so much shitty work now, and there used to be such much better work, and I disagree. I think that back in the day when advertising was pretty much 30 and 60-second commercials on print ads, and it did two things. It either made you really laugh, it either entertained, or it was epic and beautiful and like, wow, like a film. And or it was informational, but usually that work didn't get a lot of attention. But in that sense, it was very superficial, because a print ad can only do so much, and a 30 or 60-second film can only do so much. And I think there's so much work now that has so much more depth. Stories are told in such a more deep ways, and brands have to be authentic and can't just like hit people with a quick thing, because millennials and Gen Zs, they go studying and researching. They're cynical and they want to know if this brand, is it greenwashing or is it really true? And I think of an example of a campaign was when REI, what was it, like 4 or 5 years ago, did that amazing Black Friday campaign. They didn't just do a film about they started, I think, with a full page newspaper ad in the New York Times saying what they did. And then there was a film on YouTube, but they didn't stop there. You know, they on Pinterest, they did like thousands of hiking tours and trails and guides and maps for people who were going to go out that day. And they created product and merchandise. And so I actually think the in the business now, we see brands doing things with so much more depth and speaking in so many different ways. I really feel like nowadays we do truly see advertising that can change people's lives, and brands can speak with values. So I actually think there was a superficiality to the work that I grew up admiring, that we have succeeded, gone beyond. And I think there's a lot of brands now that are doing work that's touches people in a much deeper way. And I mean deeper in a positive way now, not the bottom of the ocean.
Karin, I'm so happy about this answer. You know why? Because I'm fed up with people of our generation that's like, they always bash on advertising and they always like look back in a nostalgic way. And it was better before. And they all look like grandpa, you know, like every generation does.
I agree.
I go back to Christmas. I go back for Christmas to Italy, and my dad is there sitting at the table telling me how it was so much better before. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Every generation does it. And when we do it in advertising, it makes me sad, because it's like almost like you get stuck into the past. And you're right. There's much more depth right now. It's not just about the fact that you have so many platforms, but the different way to tell a story adds depth to the story itself. And it's so refreshing to hear it coming from someone who had an amazing career. And it's like you have been like, you know, on this ride for a while. And because it really, like, you know, I can't listen to anymore to the people that like complain and say, yeah, it was better before. No, it wasn't. It wasn't, because I think like we were more stuck to like, you know, certain kind of roles. You know, art director had to be an art director, copywriter had to be a copywriter, and that's it. You know what I mean? But now, like, it's not question anymore, like being an art director, be a copywriter. The question is more focused on like the content itself and the idea itself. And you can be whatever you want to be. Whatever you want to be, you can be. And like, I think that we have a certain kind of freedom and a certain kind of depth that we didn't have back then. And like, you know, I started working in 1998, and it was very much like schematic, like very much like structured, like, you know.
Yeah. It's funny, while you were talking, it reminded me of another campaign that I think is a great example. Harvey Nichols, I bought it for myself.
Yeah.
You know, when you and I grew up, the work that we admired that would have won an award was a TV spot. What was really genius about that ad was the products they made and that they sold. You know, and again, that goes to show the depth and richness of how we're telling stories now.
Talking about a region, I think I still remember the Grand Prix for like the piercing shop done by Eric Castle from Leroy, Norway. I think like it was a poster.
I don't remember.
It was a very famous poster campaign. It was one of the first example of like ambient media back then. You know, everybody was concentrated on like print. The guy came out with this idea of like, you know, pretty much like taking a poster and hanging on like, you know, door handles, things like this, so remind like the piercing.
Right.
Yeah, it came from Norway. I think it was Leroy, Norway, and I became famous for this. But it was one of the very first examples when we start doing something different. Anyway, great.
Yeah.
Fourth question. There is a poet I greatly admire, and he goes by the name of Oceanguang. He was born in 1988, so he's a very, very young poet in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, on a rice farm. And his grandmother was a young woman who grew up on the countryside, while his grandfather was a white American soldier in the Navy, originally from Michigan. Now, a 2-year-old Wong and his family arrived in 1991 in a refugee camp in the Philippines before achieving asylum, immigrated to the United States and settling in Hartford, Connecticut. He wrote a few collection of poems, but only one novel so far. And I gotta say, the title of the novel, just the title, it's mind-blowing. It goes, "On Earth, we are briefly gorgeous. If you could keep unaltered one thing from the unforgiving passing of time that define the beauty of living, what would that thing be?"
Joy.
Ah.
I mean, joy is obviously something that comes and goes, and it you know, a certain joyful moment dies, but then another beautiful one comes. But I think right now, especially, we're in a time where people are, we're in a very difficult time in the world right now. We're in a very difficult time. A lot of different people in a lot of different countries are suffering very deeply for many reasons, COVID being one of them, environmental destruction. In the United States, the difference between rich and poor has never been greater. And we're in a time where a lot of people are losing their joy. I was just talking with a friend who's a therapist the other day who said therapists have never had more business. There's so many people that are struggling. And so I think the thing that I would keep unaltered, or the thing that I hope that people can keep more of and find more of right now, especially, is joy.
That's a beautiful answer. Joy is such a great and intense emotion, such a fleeting emotion, but when it hits, it hits you right in the spots. Beautiful. Fifth question. Jean Barrett is recognized as the first woman to have completed a voyage circumnavigating the globe in 1774. She was born in an age of exploration that was reserved almost exclusively to men. Yet she found a way to break the rule and write her own destiny. The story has it that the French Navy didn't allow women to be on a ship. So when her lover and former employer, Philibert Commerson, was hired as a chief naturalist for a voyage around the world, they concocted a plan. Jean Barrett would become Commerson cabin and assistant, and they would call her Jean after her father. If you were to meet this woman right now, what would the first thing that you would say to her?
Well, I think on a personal level, I would just say, what was your favorite part of the voyage? I would be curious. What was your favorite part of the voyage? Because I would want to learn from her. Right. But I think in the context of this conversation, what I would probably say is, Jean, I feel you. Because, and it comes back to your first question, it comes back to being an imposter and wearing clothes that aren't yours, that you have to hide your true self in order to be part of something you really want to do and be in a world you're not invited to. And so in a way it comes back to the very first question. And I think, like I said, in the beginning of my career, I didn't feel like I quite could be who I was. And I had to try to be like one of the American bros. And then now I think what's exciting, and what Jean was an example of, is we see women no longer have to wear somebody else's clothes. The patriarchy, thank God, is dying. And women can wear their own clothes and be themselves, and they don't have to hide in the cabin. And it's the tempo in which that is happening is accelerating. And if anything, I think, so I think that's fantastic. But I also think that we as women have a responsibility, because we remember it was in our generation that we had to hide. Many of us felt like we had to fight our way to come out of the cabin or take off, wear our own clothes. So we now have a responsibility to help accelerate that for the other voices that haven't been invited into the business, right? We're just starting to really realize the importance of other voices and diversity. And I think we can help that new generation of talent and inspiration feel respected in their own clothes faster than we were.
Given the little progress that this industry made regarding like the diversity and like, you know, the emancipation of women in the advertising industry, if you were to meet Jean Barrett, would you say, Jean, I'm sorry, we fail you? Or Jean, we're still trying?
I don't think I would say either of those. I would say, Jean, look at us now.
That's good.
I would say, Jean, thank you for starting, and look at us now. I mean, we're still trying, but I think in my career, in my 25 years that I've been in the business, I have seen leaps and bounds that are, you know, unbelievable.
That's true.
So I would say we're still trying but we're still trying, but look at what we're achieving. Look at where we're going.
That sounds really awesome. Okay. Good. So question. Once Jerry Seinfeld was asked, what made you quit the show, the Seinfeld show? What's that thing that made you think this is the last season, that's it? And he replied, it's really important if you are in anything creative to leave something in the tank and not run the tank dry, because it could never get refill again. Leave something in the tank, and that will prepare you onto something better, onto the next things. Now, to put it in transatlantic term, don't dry the ocean and expect to sail away. So inspired by those words, here's my question for you. What's the thing that make you say, the job here is done, I'm gonna move on to the next chapter? And most importantly, what do you leave in the tank from your previous chapter that you can bring into the next one?
This is also juicy. And again, this I think is another, we could do like a long panel on this. And I have just recently changed jobs. 6 months ago, I left agency world after working on the agency side my whole career, and went to the brand side. I'm now VP of Creative at Lyft, the rideshare company in the United States. And I've actually not changed that jobs that many times in my career. I've been in the business for 25 years and I've only had 4 jobs. So I haven't left and moved on that many times. But I would say that for me, the thing that makes me feel like the job is done here is if I'm not really learning anything new anymore. And so for me, it's less about keep making sure there's still something in the tank before I go to the next one. But it's more about, is this current experience putting more new gas in my tank? And I can tell you love poetry, and it made me think of a poem by Robert Browning. He uses the word man, let's say also could be woman, or also could be they. A man's reach should exceed his grasp.
Oh, wow.
And for me, and it comes back to that story of wearing clothes that you can't wear yet. It's like, for me, going to some place where I don't know how to do that yet, or I haven't done that before, and I'm not even sure if I can do it, is a really energizing challenge. It can be scary, but it's also really energizing and makes me feel really alive. And the thing that is the thing in the tank that I bring with me to that job or to that next challenge, is what I just learned in the previous one. So how can I build on what I just learned in this job to propel myself into figuring out and succeeding at the next one? So I think of it less as a tank of creativity that you start with and you deplete a little bit your whole life. I think of it more as each job you have, what new can you learn there? And then you use that to jump to the next one, I would say.
Love the answer. Now you bring me actually a question in my head right now. How many tanks do you think you have? Do you think like KARIN has one tank where everything is like in it, or you have different tanks? I don't know.
That's beautiful. That's very visual. And what it makes me think of is this amazing hot spring spa in Mexico outside of San Miguel de Allende called La Gruta, which is it's a series of caves where you step in and the water is lukewarm. And then you go through from one cave and you swim in there and you go through a teeny little tunnel to the next one. And it's a little bit smaller cave, but the water is warmer. And then you step through another little step, a little tiny passage you go through and you get to another cave. And the water is smaller, but even warmer. And then you go through a successive amount of vessels until you come to the hot spring, which is just hot water that comes right out of the mountain. And so, or maybe you could see it as ladders. I think I see it as a series of tanks that are each individual, but are each connected by the step to the next tank.
I love the image. It's a great image. Hey, look, this is the last question. And we asked to all our guests. If there was a wind that blew your sail and you had to name it, what would the name be?
Well, the interesting thing is, well, you should ask that because it's actually a form of wind. I think the wind in my sail is energy. And I mean it is, I have come to discover, and that's been one of the beautiful things to get older, is I've come to realize what my own superpower is. And my superpower is that I can be transformative by bringing energy to things, by bringing energy to people, by bringing energy to an organization. And at the same time, the way I get my energy is from other people. So I get energized by other people, and then I use that to energize the situation I'm in and other people. And so I think that the wind in my sail is this sense of energy. I can get energy from a person. I'm getting energy from this conversation with you right now. An hour before, I got energy from a conversation with a presentation an agency partner gave us and had some beautiful ideas that I got energized by. And then I get energy when I'm talking to my team, if I can feel like I'm giving them some energy. And I think I get energized also by a great idea. I get energized by people, seeing young people find themselves and building on something. And when I don't feel energized, either by a situation, an idea, or the people I'm with, I tend to move on.
That is an awesome answer. I mean, I love the word energy, like, you know, and actually, you know, sometimes we have in our life words that recur quite often. They pop up like numbers. Like, you know, I believe like in numbers that like a pattern that you find in your life, like, you know, and energy is one of that for me. Like, you know, it actually comes like quite often. And when it comes along, it truly like shapes, like either shapes an entire day positively or negatively, or like, you know, affects like my mood. So it's a great powerful word. Look, Karin, I think that's the crossing was like, you know, amazing to me. I mean, it's like, I'm always like very like, you know, I'm always lack of adjectives when I found like, you know, ocean that they are like so intense and so like, you know, full of history. But I had to thank you so much for being on board a Transatlantic. I know that like you dedicated like almost an hour to our conversation, and I congratulate you, like even if it's 6 months after on your new job, and like, you know, and thank you so much. And I hope like to see you like beyond Zoom in person one day. Okay.
Absolutely. Me too. Thank you so much, Simone. And again, thank you for bringing energy to people like me by this beautiful podcast you're running.
Thank you. Bye, Karin.